Ikaw ba ay isang rehistradong botante? Narito ang ilan sa mga dapat mong malaman para sa 2022 elections. Kailan ang araw ng pagboto? Ang sabayang nasyonal at lokal na eleksyon ay idarao sa May 9, 2022 at bagamat mainit ang diskusyon ukol sa mga tatakbo bilang presidente at vice-presidente, higit pa sa dalawang posisyon na ito ang ating iboboto. Ayon sa datos ng COMELEC, mayroong 18,180 positions na pupunan sa eleksyon sa May 2022. Kasama dito ang mga ihahalal para sa Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao na magdaraos ng unang regular na eleksyon kung hindi ito ipagpapaliban. One President, one Vice President, 12 Senators, 253 District Representatives, 63 Party List Representatives, 81 Governors, 81 Vice Governors, 782 Provincial Board Members, 146 City Mayors, 146 City Vice Mayors, 1,650 City Councilors, 1,488 Municipal Mayors, 1,488 Municipal Vice Mayors, at 11,908 Municipal Councilors. Ngayon na ikaw ay nakapagparehistro na, ang susunod na hakbang ay bumoto sa May 9, 2022 at tiyakin na ang boto mo ay mabibilang. Markahang maigi ang bilog katabi ng iyong piniling kandidato sa balota gamit ang marker na galing sa COMELEC. Huwag sulatan ng kahit na ano ang balota. Huwag punitin, mantsahan o gusitin ito. Pumili lamang ng isang kandidato para sa mga sumusunod na posisyon. Para sa posisyong nasyonal, President, Vice President at Party List Representative. Para sa mga botante sa Metro Manila, Mayor at Vice Mayor. Para sa mga botante sa labas ng Metro Manila, Governor, Vice Governor, City or Municipal Mayor at City or Municipal Vice Mayor. Ang pagpili na higit pa sa isang kandidato para sa mga naturang posisyon ay magiging dahilan para hindi mabilang ang iyong boto. Pumili lang ng hanggang 12 kandidato para sa pagkasenador. Ang pagpili na higit pa sa 12 kandidato para sa pagkasenador ay magiging dahilan para hindi mabilang ang lahat ng iyong boto sa pagkasenador. Tandaan, huwag matakot bumoto at bumoto ng tama.
forum Walang Forgive and Forget, Ampatuan Massacre, and the May 2022 elections. This forum is hosted by Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines and the Philippine Press Institute, supported by Seidel Foundation in cooperation with Internews and Radyo Libertas of Holy Cross College. By the way, I am Miss Angelica Simpao and I will be your moderator for this forum. Binabati din po namin ang lahat ng nakikinig at nanonood via Facebook live stream at via Radyo Libertas. Ayan, isang magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. At batiin po muna natin lahat po ng mga schools and universities na makakasama po natin this afternoon. Ayan, makakasama po natin yung mga schools and universities like University of the Philippines, Diliman, UP Visayas, and UP Open University, University of Santo Tomas, Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Holy Cross College, University of Eastern Philippines, St. Mary's University, Colegio de San Lorenzo, Occidental Mindoro State College, Cavite State University, Bicol University, Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Valenzuela, Batangas State University, Colegio de San Juan de Letran, University of Eastern Philippines, University of Negros Occidental Recoletos, Mariano Marcos State University. Binabati din po namin ang mga estudyante at guro ng University of Rizal System Angono, Biliran Province State University, Isabela National High School, Jose Rizal Memorial State University, Marikina Polytechnic College, Muntinlupa National High School, Santa Cruz National High School, Mindanao State University General Santos City, Catanduanes State University, Southern Leyte State University, Lanao National High School, Benguet State University, Laguna State University, and also the Bulacan State University, Parañaque National High School. At ayan po, marami po tayo mga schools and universities na makakasama this forum at kasama din po natin yung ICCT colleges, New Era University, Marikina Polytechnic College, Lagro High School, Liceo de Cagayan University, Godwin's Montessori School, Ateneo de Manila University, Far Eastern University, Rizal Technological University, and Perpetual Health College of Manila. 46 schools po ang makakasama natin this afternoon via Zoom and via Facebook live stream and also via Radyo Libertas. Binabati po namin kayo ng isang mapagpalayang hapon. And also makakasama din po natin yung media and campus press. Ayan, batiin ko din po sila, baka magtampo po sila eh. Kasama natin ang Benilde Press Corps, De La Salle College of St. Benilde, Vera Files, Mindanao Today, Pinoy Weekly, Philippine Collegian, Action Radyo Bacolod, College Editors Guilds of the Philippines, La Verdad Christian College, Press 1 PH, CNN Philippines, Central Luzon Balita, Philippine News Agency, and DYSL. Yan, isang magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. I hope you can hear me well. Yan, without further ado, let us hear the welcome message of the Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines, JSAP Founding President and Chair, Professor Lucia Tangi. Good afternoon, Prof. Lu.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Nakakatuwa tong hapon na ito, no? Kasi, well, as of 12 noon, there were 221 who have registered to this forum. I think marami sa kanila manonood sa Facebook at makikinig sa radyo. Maraming salamat po for joining us. And we have people from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Sana po every year ganito tayo palagi, kadami, no, na nagko-commemorate ng event na ito hanggang hindi natin nakakamit ang tunay na hustisya. So 12 years ago, 58 people, including 32 journalists, were killed in broad daylight in Ampatuan town, Maguindanao. Most of the victims were part of a convoy making their way to the local office of the Commission on Elections. The killing was the single worst massacre of journalists in history. But on December 2019, the Quezon City Regional Trial Court Branch 221 convicted 28 principal suspects, um, including 8 members of the Ampatuan clan and 15 others as accessories to the violent murders. Yet not all the suspects have been accounted for, and convictions were handed down for just 57 murders. The court did not include journalist Reynaldo Bebot Momay, whose body was never found. The Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines Incorporated has decided to partner with the Philippine Press Institute to organize this activity because we want fellow educators and their students to remember the painful lessons of the Ampatuan Massacre. Most of the students who are present this afternoon were probably in their grade school when the massacre happened and probably did not understand why it happened. We continue to shout, "Walang forgive and forget." For as long as some perpetrators of the Ampatuan Massacre remain unpunished, we shall continue to cry, "Walang forgive and forget." For as long as there are journalists who are murdered in the practice of their profession, we shall continue to say, "Walang forgive and forget." And for as long as the culture of impunity persists in this country, we shall continue to shout, "Walang forgive and forget." Magandang hapon po muli and welcome to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Lucia Tangi, the founding chair of Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines. This forum is hosted by JSAP and Philippine Press Institute, supported by Hans Seidel Foundation in cooperation with Internews and Radyo Libertas of Holy Cross College. So ito po, this event aims to remind people, especially young journalists, of the dangers of the profession and also a call to protect the media, the so-called fourth estate of the government. As we commemorate the 12th year of the Ampatuan Massacre, and an event that is considered the world's single deadliest attack on journalists. Ayan, to tell us more about this forum, we have the Executive Director of the Philippine Press Institute, Sir Ariel Sabelino.
Good afternoon, Angelica. Maraming salamat po sa mga nanonood sa ating Inside the Meeting Room at saka watching us live via Facebook, cross-posted and all other platforms. Thanks very much, Professor Tangi, for setting the tone of this forum. Kami po sa PPI, sa Philippine Press Institute, ay nagpapasalamat ng malaki sa JSAP for taking on this partnership. Alam namin nasa the last stretch na tayo ng year na ito. Probably we can consider this as one of our year-ender activities. Pero nakitaan namin na importante ito, not just because we're commemorating it, but because we have to impress on the Filipino people na ang kakilakilabot or karumal-dumal na pagpaslang ng napakaraming tao, 58 of them, on the infamous November 23, 2009 event or incident ay kailangan pag-usapan natin outside even of the commemoration. What I'm saying is that through the support of Hans Seidel Foundation, at pakikipagtulungan ng other media organizations which are also commemorating the Maguindanao Massacre, a few days from now, ay kailangan natin ipagpatuloy yung diskusyon, not just on behalf of the victims and their families, pero para po sa entire media industry na laging sinisigaw ang walang forgive at walang forget. Sabi nga ni Ma'am Lu kanina, wag nating tigilan ang battle cry na ito for as long as we do not get justice for the entire victims of this infamous incident. Mahirap magpatawad. Ang Diyos na nagpapatawad, ika nga. Pero in time, we'll all learn to forgive. Pero wag nating kalimutan at we should not forget this painful lesson in our history. Masakit man sa ating lahat, lalong-lalong na masakit pa dun sa mga victims ng families, ay kailangan natin silang tulungan para makabangon. Hindi po madali ang magpatawad at kalimutan ang lahat. Pero sa forum na ito at sa gagawin pang mga talakayan in the future or in the coming days, we'd like to tell you na importanteng huwag kalimutan ang diskusyon. while we'll be commemorating this every year, dapat in all the days and months of the year, ay kailangan natin pag-usapan yung importante, not just that incident, pero yung entirely the media welfare ng ating mga kasamahan. Lalong-lalo na po yung mga talagang nahirapan during this pandemic, lalong-lalo na po yung mga kasamahan natin na nawalan ng trabaho at pinagkaitan ng karapatan or ng oportunidad mabuhay. Ito ang isa sa mga lessons ng commemoration ng Ampatuan Massacre or Maguindanao Massacre, to be able to move forward the insightful discussion or significant discussions na merong kinalaman dun sa ating industriya at merong kinalaman dun sa engagement natin sa publiko natin. Remember, hindi po natin mapag-uusapan ang press freedom, especially with the forthcoming elections. We'll be trooping to the precincts, most especially during these difficult times. Ay pupunta po ang mga journalists natin sa field, magko-cover, and we hope and pray they're all safe and nothing of that sort will happen again. And that we thank everyone for joining us today, and we enjoin you to pray, not just for the victims and their families, but for all of us struggling to survive in these difficult times. And the other lesson, perhaps more importantly, is to talk, or not talk, but really call out the government of their role on media welfare. Paano nga ba pinangangalagaan ng ating gobyerno ang kapakanan ng ating media industry o ng mga journalists? Because I believe that all of us, especially the government, considers the critical role the journalists play. The journalists play not only their roles but their functions in the society. Pag ang pinag-uusapan po ay proteksyon ng press freedom at saka promotion ng democracy sa ating bansa. Having said that, we thank everyone for this fruitful afternoon, and I hope that you engage with our speakers. At meron po tayong chat room for you to comment and to ask your questions to our panelists. And thanks to our panelists, especially yung isa pong representative ng victims, ng families ng victims, ay narito po mamaya para po ibahagi sa ating yung mensahe nila. And thanks to Pity Fund for also taking heed of this invitation. We thought that you are very important in all these discussions. And of course, alongside NUJP and the group of JSAG, not JSAG, Journalist Safety Advisory Group, that will be represented by Red Batari, who has talked about the Philippine safety for journalists, Philippine Plan for the Safety of Journalists. Ito po ang usapin natin ngayon. Moving forward, sana po ay matuto tayo sa lessons ng history para po pangalagaan ang ating kapangalan at isulong ang journalism, excellent journalism sa ating bansa. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sir Ariel Sebelino, for that message. Tama po na sana hindi lang tuwing anniversary nagkakaroon ng forum, but also sa classrooms, social media, and other platforms para sa ating mga aspiring and future journalists. Napakahalaga na malaman po talaga nila ang history. Masakit man, pero mayroong lessons na dapat talagang matutuhan at maalala. Ipaglaban ang hustisya at karapatan ng media. Now, let us hear a message from the resident representative to the Philippines of Seidel Foundation, Attorney Getz Heineke.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Angelica. Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Getz Heineke. I'm the resident representative of the German Seidel Foundation, and we are sponsoring and supporting this activity here this afternoon. Because for us, so the Hans Seidel Foundation is a German NGO, and we are here in the Philippines for more than 40 years, and our goal is to build up democracy and good governance. And so for us, journalists and free journalists are a key player and essential for democratic progress in the country. And yeah, that's a little bit the background of our collaboration with the PPI. having said all this, I think I better stop talking because I'm a foreigner. I was not here 11 years ago, 12 years ago, and I'm not a journalist. I'm just a lawyer. So thank you very much that all of you are here for this webinar this afternoon. And yeah, I wish us an informative event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Attorney Getz of Hans Seidel Foundation for the support. Thank you so much. Now, can we have a photo opportunity with all our participants here in our Zoom? So may I ask everybody to please open your camera. Yan. Good afternoon po sa ating lahat. Okay, now let's have a photo opportunity. Sir Care, please assist me. Thank you so much. And for the first page, yan, smile po tayo.
Smile po tayo.
Okay, for the second page. Ayan yung ating mga students. Ayan, kaway-kaway po. Open your camera. Ayan, good afternoon, no? Meron po tayong 46 schools, participating schools and university na kasama this forum. Ayan, number 4, slide number 4, and number 5. Okay, thank you so much, Care, and thank you so much to all our participants. And once again, good afternoon. The Ampatuan Massacre is a decade-long fight for justice. Last December 19, 2020, members of a powerful political clan in the Philippines were found guilty of a massacre that left 58 people dead. Media journalists, this is a worst election-related violence in the Philippines. To give us an update on the Mindanao Massacre case, we have Chief of Staff of Presidential Task Force on Media Security, Attorney Perry Solis. Good afternoon po. Naka-mute po yata si Attorney.
Good afternoon to everybody. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry about the mass. I'm in the office in Manila, so thank you for this opportunity of inviting us to be part of this very meaningful and worthy undertaking of your group and all the members that made this possible. Alam niyo naman, please know that we at the Presidential Task Force on Media Security, which is under the Office of the President, is committed in putting the safety of journalists and broadcasters and other media practitioners in the Philippines. Precisely, please note that in 2016, Administrative Order Number 1 was signed by President Rodrigo Duterte to establish this task force with the mandated goal or the devoted goal of protecting the life, liberty, and security of all media workers in the Philippines. Precisely because of the slayings, killings of media personalities, journalists in the past that prompted this administration to enact this administrative order and to create this office under the Office of the President in order, of course, to prevent further media violence in the country. Please note that the Presidential Task Force on Media Security is headed presently by Undersecretary Joel C. Edco. And this is chaired actually by the Department of Justice in the person of Secretary Medardo Guevara and co-chaired by the PCOO under Secretary Martin M. Andanar. So those are our chair and co-chair. And this task force is, of course, as you may well know, this is under the whole of government approach that is being employed by the government in most of its undertakings. So we are using the whole of government approach. This actually is an interagency task force composed of various members, including the Philippine National Police, the Department of Justice, the National Bureau of Investigation, and many other agencies. And we also have our observers like the PPI, the National Press Club, the NUJP, and other private media organizations. So this is actually a collaborative effort in order to prevent further media violence happening in this country. So please take note that this presidential task force is under the office of the president. So, so if I may I may be allowed to share my screen in order
Sure.
to give
Yeah.
the updates. Actually, most of the information that will be given here is available in the internet. You can actually check this. So, can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So these are the present updates on the Ampatuan Massacre case, plus some brief history that happened in the case. So, so, so as mentioned earlier by our host, it is actually a dark chapter in the Philippine media. It's not only actually the worst media violence that occurred in the Philippines, not only in the Philippines, but actually in the world, because of the so many journalists and broadcasters and media workers that have been killed during that time. So please take note during the from the 2000 from the Committee to Protect Journalists. This is a media watchdog or a media advocacy group that is based in the United States. They actually release every year the Global Impunity Index. The Global Impunity Index is about what they claim as the where countries where killers of media workers happens and where the killers are not punished accordingly. So in 2009, when the massacre took place, we became sixth in the in CPJ's Global Impunity Index, and then from sixth, then we became third. The list actually, the CPJ's list is from counts the country with the worst ranking in the impunity index. So from sixth, we became third, and from 2015 to 2016, because up to that point, there was no judgment yet on the Ampatuan Massacre. So we were fourth and fifth from 2017 up to the point that the ruling was given by the regional trial court. So that is the ranking. So please take note this number one being the worst. So from sixth, third, fourth, and fifth. That is our ranking in 2019 in the Global Impunity Index. So taking a glimpse of the November 23, 2009 incident. So these are the pictures that happened, that were taken after the event. So as mentioned a while ago, the remains of 58 victims, including the members of the family of Maguda Datu, his wife and the sisters of his wife, plus 32 media members were found in Barangay Salman, Ampatuan, Maguindanao. So please take note, aside from the victims, the relatives of Maguda Datu and 32 members, there were also basically bystanders who were just passing along and were unfortunately became part of the massacre. So please take note, because the elections, of course, are coming also next year. We consider the Ampatuan Massacre as an election-related violence because this killing occurred during the filing of the certificate of candidacy of Maguda Datu for governor, because he was, of course, going against the powerful clan of the Ampatuans in that area. So these were the pictures taken after the massacre. So finally, on December 19, 2019, after a decade of trial, the victims were finally, the victims were given justice when the accused, headed by Zandal Ampatuan, were found guilty of murder. So many others were actually, as you all know, many others were also convicted of murder, and some were declared as accessories and accomplices to the crime. So the efforts of the Duterte administration. So on November 23, they had a meeting with the victims of the families, and also these pictures of the victims with Duterte. So please take note. Although the event happened in 2009, it was only during this period that during this time that a decision was made in the massacre. So a decade. You remember, if you can take note of that, it took 10 years for the court to decide on this case. Anyway, some of the facts that may be of note is that during the time of the massacre, President Duterte, as then mayor of Davao, actually provided a helicopter in order to find the site of the massacre. So that is this picture showing then Governor Magudadato thanking President Duterte for providing the helicopter that discovered the site. So according to Governor Magudadato, it was vital because of the prompt discovery of massacre site prevented perpetrators from burying the victims and their vehicles in two big pits reportedly dug 2 or 3 days earlier before the carnage at Sitio Masalay, Barangay Salman in Ampatuan town. So some of the updates is as of 2020, so after the convictions of the masterminds and some of the accomplices, so there are also still many other suspects that are at large and being hunted by the law enforcement agencies of our country. So in 2020, 4 of the suspects were actually captured, including Gambayang Kasim, Faisal Dimaukom, Ismael Barakir, and Alfie Pagabangan. So they were captured last year in January. So 4 of the suspects were captured, and they are actually undergoing trial in the same case in before the Regional Trial Court of Quezon City. In 2021, Andaimi M. Sincalo was captured, or alias Yamani Bagad Dimaukom, in April 2021. Sincala's, of course, arrest comes after the order of the task force, the PNP, the NBI, the Department of Justice, in the intensified nationwide manhunt for the remaining suspects. So as of the latest for this case is that there is the presentation of the evidence for the accused is set on December 1 and 15, 2021. And as you well all know, because of the pandemic, most of the hearings today are done through video conferencing. But in spite of the pandemic, please take note that the trial of the case for those 4 suspects and this person, Mr. Sincala, is still ongoing and being heard by the original court that decided on the case, which is under the salo of Judge Jocelyn Reyes Solis. Another important update is, of course, last June 14, 2021, the Court of Appeals Special 6th Division overturned the decision of the regional trial court in regard to police SPO2 Badawi Bakal, which was earlier in 2019 acquitted by the Honorable Court for, of course, for reasonable doubt. In the decision, the CA ruled that the lower court committed gross misapprehension of facts and grave abuse of discretion amounting to a void judgment when it acquitted the accused. He was sentenced to the indeterminate penalty of imprisonment of 4 years, 2 months as an accessory. So prison correctional because of he was considered as an accessory. So please take note, in our judicial system, justice system, rarely that a decision of acquittal is overturned, because please take note of the principle of double jeopardy. So the reasoning given by the Court of Appeals is that the decision of the court with respect to Mr. Badawi Bakal was considered a void judgment. Hence, a void judgment is considered as a non-existent judgment. So they overturned the acquittal and he was found guilty. Some of the and still, please take note that the police and law enforcement agencies are still looking for the remaining suspects in the case. And as you well all know, it's legal in the Philippines to set up a reward for the capture of the accused. I believe only in the United States and in the Philippines is that system allowed that we set up a reward for the capture of suspects. So these are the most important suspects that are being hunted by the police in the person of Datu Banarin Ampatuan and Datu Saldi Ampatuan. Of course, there are many other suspects, policemen and other of the other accessories and accomplices to the crime. So they are the faces and the amount of reward. So previously for these two suspects, the reward is 300,000 pesos. For this remaining suspect, the reward given for the capture is 250,000 each, and also for the rest of the suspects. So these are the photos of the suspects that are still being hunted by the police in connection with the Ampatuan Massacre. So in a report given by the Department of Justice, please take note the mandate of our office is merely to monitor cases of media violence. So the one handling the case is actually the Department of Justice through the National Prosecution Service. So as per their latest report, so these are the summary of their report. So as you well all know, 20 accused were convicted, including the masterminds, with the penalty of reclusion perpetua, which is actually life imprisonment. Please take note that the country no longer has the death penalty. So usually for murder, the death penalty may be given, but since that's been abolished in our country, so life imprisonment or reclusion perpetua of 15 years. And 15 accused were found to have acted as accessories and sentenced to suffer the indeterminate penalty of 6 years of prison correctional imprisonment up to prison mayor. So those are the penalties of imprisonment given to the 15 who acted as accessories, and 57 were acquitted. except of course, minus the Mr. Bakal. 5 accused are currently detained and on trial. Those were the 5 that were just arrested in 2020 and 2021. And please take note, 83 accused are still at large, including the 8 additional accused stated in the fourth amended information that was filed by the Department of Justice through the National Prosecution Service. So basically, those are the latest updates on the Ampatuan Massacre. So about the Presidential Task Force, please take note that we are actually recording all of the cases of media violence. So as per our records, the conviction since 1986, from the time of President Cory Aquino, there are 51 total number of cases, meaning 51 media killers that were killed, which resulted to the 68 number of convicted killers of media workers. So 51 cases resulted to the guilty verdict, and 68 of the out of the 51, 68 media killers were convicted since 1986. So in spite of the fact that our justice system may be slow, but please take note that eventually those who are accused of media violence are found guilty. So as of today, 68 of them have been found guilty by our court. So in view of of course, some of critics may have a different opinion regarding this. But in 2020, the CPJ, according to the CPJ, which I mentioned earlier, so ito yung dati sa CPJ, no? Sa Global Impunity Index, this was the ranking of the Philippines. We're always in the top 5 of the worst countries in the world in terms of impunity in the killing of journalists. So in 2020, the Committee to Protect Journalists declared the Philippines as the biggest mover, moving from 5th place to 7th place. So nasa 7 tayo currently. So even in the 2021 Global Impunity Index, we are still in the 7th place. If you want to read more on how the CPJ does its ranking, you can actually visit their website. There is a 10-year time frame for them to consider cases that has not been solved, which will be included in the counting in the Global Impunity Index. But please take note, the CPJ has other lists like world's worst places to be a journalist or 10 most censored countries, and the Philippines is not included in those lists. So another media advocacy group is the Reporters Without Borders, which is based in France, or Reporters Sans Frontiers, because it's a French word, no? Kaya, so it's RSF, but Reporters Without Borders. So they also, every year, they release the so-called World Press Freedom Index. So as you can see in their graph, this is the ranking of the Philippines from the time of President Arroyo to President Aquino and currently to President Duterte. So if you want to read more on the RSF, how do their rankings, then please visit their website. But please take note. So if you're going to base the state of press freedom in the country to the World Press Freedom Index, so basically the lowest grade of President Aquino, which is 138. The highest grade of President Aquino, which is 138, is the lowest grade currently of President Duterte, which is also 138 in the ranking. So I don't know if you can study this and have your own opinion about it, but this is what is stated in their World Press Freedom Index for the Philippines. So that ends my presentation. It's just a brief presentation. Thank you for this time and for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for the update, Attorney Perry Solis. For the students and participants who want to ask now, maybe later during our open forum, Attorney Perry, you will stay naman po during the open forum, ano? Okay po, ayan. Para sa ating mga students later po, meron tayong time to ask yung mga questions. Okay, thank you so much, Attorney, for the updates about the Ampatuan Massacre. Okay, among the forefront on the battle to protect journalists, they always stood strong. Let us know more about the continuous campaign for justice. We have the chair of the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, Sir Jonathan De Santos. Good afternoon, Sir Jonathan.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Angelica. Good afternoon, everyone. Just some notes. No? So it was said shortly after the guilty verdict was handed down in December 2019 for 57 counts of murder in the Ampatuan Massacre, that decision was not the end for the fight for justice. Although many, including NUJP, hailed the court decision as a triumph of justice for the victims of the worst incident of electoral violence in Philippine history and the deadliest single attack on journalists in the world, we rejected the notion that the case was already resolved. There have been positive developments since then, like the conviction of SPO2 Badawi Bakal, a police officer who manned a checkpoint in Sitio Masalay in Ampatuan town. He was found guilty beyond reasonable doubt as an accessory in the killings. But despite that, members of the Ampatuan clan have already started their appeals on that conviction. Shortly after that verdict, the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility also noted that the decision was partial and only covered charges against 117 of 197 who were named perpetrators. 80 accused were still at large when the case was submitted for decision in August 2019, and the trial for cases against these 80 had been temporarily archived pending the arrest. We welcome the updates from the Presidential Task Force on Media Security that more of the accused have been arrested since then. We also note, however, that the convictions can still be overturned or modified, which means that we need to monitor the appeals process closely. In the meantime, witnesses and their families will likely also face pressure and security risks even after the verdict, especially as the appeals process continues. We noted then, as we do note now, that many are not enrolled in the Department of Justice's Witness Protection Program and have been living in their known communities, which should make them vulnerable to possible retaliation. Justice has also been elusive for the family of Reynaldo Bebot Momay Jr., who was not included among the victims of the massacre because his remains have yet to be found. At the press conference in November 2020, Bebot's daughter, Reyna Fe Castillo, stressed that her father was among the victims. She said then that, "For me, to forget is not an option. It is never an option. It will never be an option. The 58th victim was my father, and that victim is Reynaldo Bebot Momay," she said then. Forgetting is not an option for us either. It will never be an option. And for journalists and journalism students, the best that we can do to not forget is to do this through what we do best, by reporting on developments or lack of developments in the case and keeping the story alive. Although we remember the massacre every year, updates and reports will help keep the public's eyes on the case and also keep the memories of our colleagues alive. Knowing that we have not forgotten will also help the families keep their hope for fuller justice someday. NUJP believes and has been campaigning for Fight for 58. This is a reminder that there were 58 victims of the massacre. The campaign is also a reminder that of the massacre itself and of the need for all of us to remain vigilant. On Saturday, we will hold a short commemoration at some of the families with the Justice Now movement. And on the 23rd, we will hold a noise barrage in Quezon City, again as a small commemoration of this massacre that took so many of our colleagues. NUJP is also relaunching its mass media campaign. It's part of a broader call, or a broader reminder of the adverse conditions that journalists have been operating under. Reina Fe Castillo, in a press conference last year, said that the only reason, that her father lost his life was because of his profession. The profession that he did not only love, but the profession that guards and protects every citizen's constitutional right to press freedom. I think this is true for many of us in the profession and of us who want to enter the profession. That we do it out of a sense of love. Love for country, love for community, and love for the constitutional and fundamental freedoms that make up both. But sometimes, if not often, love is not enough. In a report released earlier this month, UNESCO stressed that impunity for journalist killings is both an obstacle to ensuring journalist safety and a chilling contributor to self-censorship. Worldwide, 87% of journalist killings remain unsolved, and as journalist homicides go unresolved and unpunished, there is little to deter the continued threat of violence. There have been many factors that contribute to the impunity for attacks on journalists and media workers, but among them is an enabling environment where it is easy to brand media workers, especially those in the community press, as prostitutes, propagandists, and enemies of the state, and by doing so justify threats, harassment, and worse against them. UNESCO noted in its report that journalists have been increasingly stigmatized and denigrated in public speech, sometimes by political figures. This is a phenomenon that the UN Human Rights Council has warned increases the risk of threats and violence against journalists and undermines public trust in the credibility of journalism. These findings are not new. Even in the wake of the 2009 killings, there was talk denigrating our colleagues who lost their lives in the Ampatuan Massacre. These rumors were attempts to somehow blame them for being caught in that orchestrated attack and being killed. Despite those rumors, and these rumors are sometimes still resurrected every now and then, the fact is that media workers were killed in the course of their jobs. Media workers have also been killed in the course of their jobs since, and this is something that should not be happening. Even as government agencies perform their mandates to investigate these attacks on journalists and hold the perpetrators and masterminds to account, we as a community must continue to raise our voices against each incident. We have also been trying to help our fellow journalists help keep themselves safe from these attacks. NUJP has been holding frequent trainings on journalist safety and has published the Philippine Journalist Safety Guide. We hope that these trainings and resources, which include tips and best practices on safe and secure coverage, will help prevent more attacks on our colleagues. Believing as well in the community's ability and imperative to self-regulate, we have published the Ethical Guide for Filipino Journalists. This reiteration of the Code of Ethics taught to us in journalism school and in the early years of our career is meant to be a guide for professional behavior that will hopefully keep us safer from, for example, libel cases and other forms of retaliation by those we report on. Of course, ethical journalism is not the responsibility of practitioners alone. In many cases, editorial decisions, angles, and framing are made way above our pay grade. And this guide looks as well into the responsibilities of newsrooms and media owners in keeping our profession alive and strong. We have to note that it is also the newsrooms that bear the responsibility of making sure that media workers are safe, are not unnecessarily put in harm's way, or if put in harm's way, have the proper precautions and safeguards in place. It is true that we must never forget the Ampatuan Massacre and that we must never lose sight of the still ongoing trial and fight for justice for the victims. But it is also true that we have a duty to make sure that no more families of media workers will suffer as the families of the victims have. As the election season heats up, we call for heightened vigilance, not just in the case of the Ampatuan Massacre, but for vigilance as well against emerging threats and risks that the politically charged atmosphere of the 2022 polls will bring. On this day and until the day that we finally win, NUJP joins the families of the victims of the Ampatuan Massacre in their calls of justice now and fight for 58. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Jonathan De Santos, for the continuous campaign and call for justice for media. And also salute to NUJP for all the trainings and seminars for the safety of our fellow journalists. And Sir Jonathan will also stay for the open forum so you can reserve yung mga questions, clarifications ng ating mga participants. We will have time for the open forum. Thank you so much, Sir Jonathan. Okay, while the case took more than 10 years to be resolved, the families of the victims remain strong despite challenges and threats. If not from their strength, we will not be able to witness or hear the promulgation of the Supreme Court. Now, let us hear the message from the relatives. We have the Chair of Justice now, Ma'am Emily Lopez. Mga kasama po ba natin si Ma'am Emily? Hello po, good afternoon. Nakamute pa po si Ma'am Emily, Ayan, so while waiting for Ma'am Emily, para po sa ating mga students, participants, or teachers na kasama via Zoom, pwede niyo pong isend via chat box ang inyong mga questions, clarifications, or message. And for our viewers via Facebook live stream, pwede niyo pong i-comment ang inyong mga questions and we will try to answer them and dito sa ating forum. Sasagutan po yan ng ating mga kasamang guest speaker this afternoon. And makasama po ba natin si Ma'am Emily? Okay, siguro po balikan po natin si Ma'am Emily dahil hindi pa po naka-open yung mic and camera niya. Okay, now let us know the Philippine Plan of Action for the Safety of Journalists. We have the Executive Director of the Center for Community Journalists and Development. We have Sir Red Batario. Good afternoon, Sir Red.
Good afternoon. Maraming salamat, Angelica. May I share the screen? May I share my screen?
Sure, Tito Red. Yeah.
Okay. Sige, again, as I said, maraming salamat and maraming salamat Ariel and Lou for putting this together. I like your team, yung walang forgive and forget, pero pwede nating idagdag din diyan yung walang iwanan, That's why we're all here today, and until such time as full justice has been achieved for the victims and their families and for journalism in the Philippines in general. My assignment today is to talk about the Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists. This is a way of looking forward also after all the hue and cry, after all the struggles, and during the continuing struggles to seek for fuller justice. Ano na ba yung nangyayari? But about the same time last year, the UNESCO cited the Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists, or PPASJ, during a conference in Myanmar on journalist safety. It was also the time that we Filipino journalists and citizens were commemorating the 11th anniversary of the Ampatuan or Maguindanao Massacre. And it is, again, as has been said earlier by the other speakers, it is worth noting that the cold-blooded murder of 58 people in that remote village in Mindanao in 2009 was election-related, and the journalists were supposed to cover the filing of the certificate of candidacy of Ismael Magundadatu, who was then trying to contest the stranglehold of the Ampatuan clan on local politics. So this afternoon, I would like to give you a glimpse of how the Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists came into being as a roadmap and as a mechanism to address safety issues such as those brought into sharp focus by the large-scale murder of journalists and other civilians in that town in Ampatuan in the province of Maguindanao. The PPASJ, or the Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists, was a result of a 2-year project called Protecting Press Freedom in the Philippines, implemented by the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication and the International Media Support, or IMS. And it ran from 2018 to 2019, and it was launched in December 2019. And it is a multi-stakeholder blueprint for journalist safety in the Philippines. And it was loosely patterned after the UN Plan of Action on the safety of journalists and the issue of impunity. And I do believe that it is the first of its kind in Asia, if not the world. The project and the plan of action were conceptualized in the context of continuing attacks against journalists and activists, especially women who have been relentlessly subjected to online sexual harassment, and also laws that negatively impact freedom of the press, such as the cyber libel law, Human Security Act that was later supplanted by the Anti-Terrorism Act, and the general climate of impunity that has today become even more pronounced. So to lay the groundwork for the implementation of the program or the project, the Journalist Safety Group was put together. It was formed to set policy direction, monitor implementation, and it is composed of media groups like the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication, the Center for Community Journalism and Development, to which I belong, the Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, the Philippine Press Institute, and the International Media Support. And we started off with a series of national and regional multi-stakeholder consultations, and which involve civil society, government agencies, police and military, religious sector, academe, business. It's really multi-stakeholder, a wide-ranging participation of different sectors. And of course, the dialogues between media and state security forces and training workshops for journalists, especially women, focus group discussions and small group consultations across the Philippines. Given the multi-stakeholder character of the project and the plan of action, the dialogues between the media and state security forces, such as the Philippine National Police and the Armed Forces of the Philippines, were critically important in increasing awareness about each other's role in democracy and in addressing specific contentious issues. For example, accusations about the involvement of security forces in attacks against journalists, and the latter's perceptions about the media's bias reporting in some cases. No? The dialogues with the state security forces are one of the main actions in the Philippine Plan of Action through its flagship area number 3, safety and protection mechanisms, which I will talk about a bit in a little while. There were also one-on-one meetings like with the Commission on Human Rights, PTPOMs, whom we have heard earlier, the Department of Labor and Employment, Bureau of Working Conditions, and several other small group discussions that transpired in the formulation of the Philippine Plan of Action. So it may also interest you to note that another action in flagship area number 3 focuses on developing a protection program for campus journalists, given the increasing attacks on students, student activists, and campus journalists around the country. Nakita natin yung nangyari sa UP, both in Cebu and also in Diliman, very recently. No? So let me just talk about ito yung process, no? yung nagkaroon ng maraming write-ups, project team discussions, and para magkaroon ng finally nung tinatawag nating Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists. Ito yung hard copy niya. No? So there are basically 5 flagship areas, no, or action points in the plan. No? Number one is integrity and professionalism, and it aims to enhance the competencies and ethical standards, professionalism, and it likes to see professionalism pursued and promoted by independent national and local press councils. And it also seeks to promote and strengthen self-regulation. And I'm happy to share with you the information that this particular flagship area or action is being implemented already, by one project called Initiatives for Media Freedom of Internews through the Peace and Conflict Journalism Network through its project on media citizen engagement, in which journalists and civil society organizations in Baguio recently put up the Cordillera Media Citizen Council, specifically to promote media self-regulation and encourage more ethical practice and for excellence in journalism. No? So meron na kagad siyang moving forward in terms of implementing this particular flagship area of the Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists. No? Yung susunod naman na flagship area is conducive working conditions. Ito yung welfare, no? And it highlights the rights of journalists and media workers to be assured of economic and job security, occupational health, safety, as provided for by national and international protocols, no? And then the third flagship area, which is safety and protection mechanisms, this one focuses on institutionalizing mechanisms for safety and protection, such as safety training, risk mapping, monitoring and reporting attacks, quick response, regular dialogues with state security forces, as I mentioned earlier. Dito marami ring ginagawa ang NUJP, for instance, in terms of training, no? Especially yung training of trainers and safety training for women journalists. No? And then the fourth one, yung criminal justice system, and this flagship area maps out and examines laws and policies that imperil or undermine press freedom and journalist safety. And it seeks to establish and strengthen legal defense services for journalists and media workers, as well as monitor and report court cases involving crimes against journalists. And the fifth and last one in the flagship areas is public information, journalism, education, and research. So it looks at how media information literacy or MIL initiatives will contribute to greater public understanding and appreciation of the role of the news media in protecting democracy. And at the same time, it looks at how it can contribute to an enhanced recognition by the public of their responsibility to safeguard press freedom. Ito yung relationship, no, between the role of media in democracy and information and citizens, no, para maintindihan na kung wala yung journalism, wala yung verified information, paano na tayo? Parang gano'n, ano? So kailangan ding maintindihan ng mas malalim. So yung key implementers, no, para siya ma-sustain, ano, itong PPASJ, yung multi-stakeholders, of course, no, na coalition, and then the Journalist Safety Advisory Group, as had been mentioned by Ariel earlier, and I-share ko na rin kung sino-sino ito, no, itong mga organizations comprising the Journalist Safety Advisory Group, and the Technical Working Group, and the PPASJ Secretariat, which is now currently the AIJC. No? The PPASJ, or the Plan of Action, is guided by its vision that, and I quote, that journalists and media workers in the Philippines are safe and protected to practice their profession, thus upholding press freedom, safeguarding human rights, and strengthening democracy. The Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists, I may say, may not have all the answers to the challenges and the issues facing Filipino journalists and citizens in general. But it does provide a light to guide us all in
True.
finding possible solutions. So, yun lamang po at maraming salamat at magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Red Batario, for explaining to us the Philippine Plan of Action for Safety of Journalists. Okay, and now let's go back to Ma'am Emily Lopez, the Chair of Justice Now, for the message. Ma'am Emily.
Hindi pa rin niya ina-unmute, Angelica, but I directly messaged her already.
Okay,
And
baka
also,
po sa internet. Apo.
Baka siguro.
Apo.
Also alerted Jonathan to contact her.
Okay po. Siguro
Para
let's go back na lang po kay Ma'am Emily later after the open forum. Sir Ariel?
Sure. Oo.
Okay po. So now let's have our open forum for our students and participants who have their questions and clarifications. You may send them here sa ating chat box. Ayan. And for the first question, meron na pong nag-send sa atin ng question. It is for Sir Attorney Perry Solis. Andito pa po ba si Attorney? Yes po. Yes po, andito pa po si Attorney. Question for Attorney Perry Solis. According to CMFR and NUJP, from January 1 to 2019 to April 30, 2020, there have been 61 reported incidents of threats and attacks against the press, including 3 journalists who were killed. Half or 30 of the 61 incidents were allegedly perpetrated by state agents, 14 by national government officials in the executive branch, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and 11 by the police, 3 by local government, and 2 by the military. So what is the PTF for media security doing to significantly lessen these incidents, especially perpetrated by state agents and government officials? Is the PTF investigating this? Attorney Perry?
Can you hear me?
Yes po.
Thank you po. Thank you for that question. But again, please take note that the Presidential Task Force on Media Security, actually we call ourselves as the PT FOMS, primary mandate under Administrative Order Number 1 is to, of course, protect the life, liberty, and security of media workers. And secondly is to monitor all cases of media violence. Please take note that as an interagency government task force, we actually coordinate with the Department of Justice, the Philippine National Police, the National Bureau of Investigation, to deal with all of these cases of media violence. Of course, we respect the data provided by those organizations, by the NUJP, the Center for Media Safety, regarding the number of journalists. But please take note that with regard to the issue of impunity, please take note that the executive department, of course, through the Philippine National Police, investigate all cases of media violence. They investigate all cases of media violence, but sometimes it takes too long for the courts. They file the case, usually less than a year. They file the case involving media violence. Like for example, in the latest killing of Mr. Dinoy, the Philippine National Police has already filed a case for murder against Mr. Campaner, Boss Campaner, the suspect or the gunman in the killing, which of course the killing took place last month and they already filed the case this month. But filing the case or the complaint with the prosecutor's office is one matter. Another matter, of course, is the length of time that it will take the justice system or the judiciary to decide on that case. We all know what happened to the Ampatuan Massacre, but of course, there are hundreds of suspects in this case. And it took the courts 10 years to decide the case. Well, as a government monitoring agency, we of course we monitor all these cases, and if anybody of you, those journalists, feel threatened in any way, you have please contact us. I will give you our number, our email address. If you think that you are in any sort of danger, you can contact us, and we can give you real-time protection. We can actually give you police protection 24 hours a day if you feel that you are threatened in any way. Huwag po kayo mag-hesitate na tawagan po kami, magbigay po kayo ng uh, ng information sa amin. We are here 24/7. If you think that you are threatened, call us, contact us immediately, and we will provide you with security immediately. Aside from that, of course, some of the measures taken by the government, by the PT firms, is that we actually hold a seminar every month for media workers, seminar exclusively for media workers, where we discuss, of course, safety during this pandemic and in the coming elections. One of our resource speakers for safety during the pandemic is, of course, CNN's Dr. Freddy Gomez. Previously, we have our new speaker for safety for elections is journalist Joel Torres. So we conduct that every month since early this month, and we will be holding the last for the region. This is a region seminar, region-based seminar. So every region, we will coordinate with the PAA and media organizations in that region and invite them to attend this seminar on media safety. Of course, just like the NUJP, we also actually released the safety handbook on journalists. And if you want a copy of that, we have available copies here. You can request from us, and we will send you copies of the handbook of journalism safety that has been created by the Presidential Task Force. So, yes, go ahead.
Follow-up question lang po with the previous question. With the election period daw po fast approaching, there have already been reported political killings. How will the government ensure that an event like the Ampatuan Massacre, will that happen again in the coming 2022 elections with reports like such emerging already?
Yes, of course. But please take note, of course, the government is here to protect you from violence. Number one, please take note that there is no state policy. Wala namang state policy to prevent or to stop press freedom or to perpetrate this media violence. Wala namang ganung state policy. Precisely, AO1 or the task force has been created in order to prevent such things from occurring. But this is a shared responsibility for all of us. Hindi lang ang gobyerno, pati mga journalists, media workers, this is your responsibility for this kind of thing that will never happen. So kaya nga we are here. Kung tingin nyo na meron kayong you're in danger, and we are constantly, please take note that we are constantly in contact with various media groups para nga in order to assure the safety. And kaya nga we developed the seminar in order to drive the point that the safety is our primary concern, especially during election when historically, alam namin na tumataas ang mga incidents of violence to media workers. So thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Attorney Perry. And another question naman po, how do we encourage daw our government to establish national policies to protect and safeguard journalists against physical threats? So again, how do we encourage our government to establish national policies to protect and safeguard journalists against physical threats?
Well, is that for me again, ma'am? Medyo, I'm sorry.
Okay po, I think Sir Jonathan or Sir Red can comment on this question po. Yung how do we encourage daw our government to establish national policies to protect and safeguard journalists against physical threats? Sir Jonathan, would you like to answer po?
Well, one of the best ways really is to keep calling their attention to these incidents, to keep calling attention to these attacks. No? There, parang may criticism na sometimes medyo OA yung media, parang konting attack na agad. No? But I really think na it would be better to overreact in times like this. No? Imbis na, kunyari, tinatapakan na pala tayo sa leeg tapos hindi natin napapansin. No? But I think si Sir Red would know more about yung interfacing with the government on this. Thank you.
Sir Red?
Sige, maraming salamat. No? Yung gusto ko yung sinabi ni Jonathan. You would know more kasi it comes with age also. No? But anyway, seriously, yes, no, kaya nga as I said in the plan that I just mentioned, yung Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists. One of the things that can be done, and this can be done at the national and at the local level, no, yung mga open dialogues, no. Pero dapat merong sincerity on both parts, on both parties, no. We're open to the idea of sitting down and discussing all of these issues, no. And siguro for starters, we can begin to agree to disagree, no. Para lang dumaloy yung usapan, because yung journalist safety, hindi lang yan about journalism. This is about the larger picture of hindi lang press freedom, no, but freedom of expression and what happens when to democracy or access of citizens to information when journalists are put in peril. No? So ganun yung premise, no. Hindi naman yung journalism or journalist for journalist's sake, no. It's really about the bigger picture. Ano ba yung implications ng safety ng mga journalists? When we became journalists, alam naman namin yung risk, no, that we will have to undertake. But please don't, ito naman yung sa government, yung message, don't make it worse, no. In fact, yung usapan niya na kailangan lang na i-enforce yung batas ng maayos, no. Journalists are not asking for special privileges. What we're asking for is that yung batas ay ipatupad ng maayos at nararapat. Sa ganon, yung safety applies to everyone, hindi lamang safety and well-being, hindi lamang para sa mga journalists, but for everyone. Ang function talaga ng journalism is really to provide the kind of information that will help people or citizens to make informed decisions on their part. And they can only do that in an environment where they are not threatened, when they are free and independent, no, to be able to fulfill those functions.
Angelica, may also please add,
Sir
analyst, from the point of view as one of the organizers. That's exactly or precisely the point of the inception of the PT Foams, to address a lot of issues on killings, harassments, incidents of violence. Alam niya ni Attorney Perry, ni Yusek Egco. And but all of us must also be wary of any batas or law that can be passed. Like for example, the Media Welfare Act. Ano ba, siguro marami dito nasa meeting and those watching us today live ay hindi alam kung ano yung pinapasa ng Media Welfare Act. But that is one issue that we have to look into kasi there are several provisions in there na baka makasagasa dun sa profesyon at saka yung kalayaan natin magpahayag. I mean, kalayaan sa pamamahayag. Ano? One of those times na kailangan, well, now is the perfect time to look into it and also call out any legislator or even the government to not pass a law that limits press freedom. In fact, we do not need any law that limits press freedom. Any law that promotes press freedom is acceptable. Pero kailangan pa rin itong suriin. Binanggit ni Jonathan kanina tsaka ni Tito Red, we're not asking for the moon and the stars. We are not a special lot. We are not special lot in this country. Journalists fight for press freedom or media freedoms because we owe it to our audiences. Hindi dahil para sa amin lang. Ang pinaghihirapang press freedom ay kaakibat nito ang pagko-consider ng karapatan ng mamamayan na mayroong access to information. At sa batas, sa ating saligang batas, importante at enshrined, constitutionally enshrined, ang access to information. Any law that prohibits or limits access to information ay sacrilege lang din sa constitutionally enshrined na karapatan natin. So, yun lang naman.
Okay, thank you so much sa mga sagot po.
Si Attorney Perry, pwede di
Attorney Perry.
mag-i-address yan. Oo.
Can I comment on the Media Welfare Workers Act?
Sure, Attorney Perry.
Actually, PT Forms is one of the we actually try to push for the Media Welfare Acts that was sponsored by Congressman Taduran. Actually, it's already been approved in the lower house last December, and we are actually waiting. We have gone through so many hearings with the Senate, but I think they have some other priorities in mind, so medyo naaantala. No? But please take note, this Media Worker Welfare Act under HB House Bill number 8140, I think consolidated version. No? Actually, it's only for the economic welfare of the. We try our best not to tackle any of the issues that you have mentioned, and specifically this Media Welfare Workers Act is to give economic benefit and to provide employment security to journalists and media workers. So, ang mga kasama sa one of the provisions is to give additional insurance benefits, hospitalization benefits, death benefits over and above those that are already being provided under existing laws like with the SSS or JSIS. Aside from that, we try to of course give employment security because the PTVMs feel that most of the workers, one of the issues of safety is because of lack of compensation of the media workers. Medyo alam namin na kung gaano kahirap, gaano liit lang ng mga swahod ng ating mga journalists dito. So in resolving that, we try to do away with the practices of some media organizations of putting some of you forever in a contractual position. And of course, we stated there that as long as this media worker has been employed for 6 months, then he should be deemed as a regular employee of the media organization. Kasi nga marami sa inyong stringer, correspondent lang, forever na gano'n na hindi nabibigyan per pahina, per board hata ang bayad sa inyo na hindi pa actually kulang pa para sa pamasahin nyo papunta dun sa assignment nyo. So we have to do away with that. But of course, medyo maraming yung mga lalo na mga media organizations because this will entail na additional expenses for them. Na sinasabi nila medyo hirap daw mga media organizations ngayon. Kaya medyo maraming opposition dito, lalo na dito sa wordings ng providing security of employment. And of course, finally, we try to put in the issue of block timing. If yung mga tao sa inyo ano ba yung block timer, medyo this is very unique in the Philippines that we lease out or we sell blocks of airtime to not even journalists, to people who are willing to pay for it. So kunyari ako, if I want to be known, tatakbo ako kakandidato ako sa local election, buy blocks of airtime, local radio, and then what will I do with that, di ba? So kaya gusto ko nga yung sinabi ni Mr. Jonathan De Santos regarding the responsibility. Alam naman natin to si Uncle Ben, di ba? With great power comes with great responsibility. And this is a very great power na inano ng Fourth Estate. Kayong mga journalists, napakalakas ng power nyo. But of course, you have to use that power with responsibility then. No? So please, sumunod sana tayo sa code of ethics ng mga journalists. So yun na po.
Yeah. Angelica, sorry, I have a quick response to Attorney Perry. I beg your kind indulgence, Attorney Perry. Okay, we so like economic welfare that has been discussed all over again amongst us media organizations.
and also news outfits across the archipelago. I like that you talk about economic welfare, specifically or especially for underprivileged journalists. And I mean those outside Metro Manila being employed in smaller outfits, di ba? Never mind yung mga malalaki, like Jonathan De Santos, Philippine Star and all. No, wala naman, may responsibility naman talaga. Siguro although, awan ko kung meron ng position ng NUJP dito, ang PPI or KBP, baka magkakaroon ng position. I think there has to be a consultation with several managements. Kasi baka meron imposition. We take it as already considering that there are labor laws, di ba? Na kailangan may benefits and all, but syempre wala naman sumusunod. I am speaking not on behalf, but I express the sentiment of smaller outfits, especially outside Metro Manila, struggling as they are during this pandemic, na talagang walang maibibigay, they're merely surviving, and that nagbawas pa ng mga tao. So hindi ako pro-management kasi yung mga struggling community newspapers, Attorney Perry, talagang kilala ko yung mga owners din nito. In the first place, business will tell us kung hindi mo kaya magbayad ng empleyado, huwag ka mag-put up ng business. Pero hindi ganun kasimple yun, because journalism is a profession of altruism and all, etc. Baka lang there must be a way to be able to address also the concerns of the management, especially those who have been struggling already pre-pandemic. Di ba ganun? Kasi pag inimpose mo yan, baka instead of promoting pluralism in media, quality media, baka kumonte, Attorney Perry, but I'm pretty sure all of these discussions and provisions have been thought out very well so that post-pandemic, meron tayong makitang maayos na pagsasabatas ng isang makabuluhang Media Welfare Act na is a win for all, not just for journalists or struggling, who have been wanting for proper remuneration, but at the same time also addressing the concerns of several managements which are already or have been struggling already ever since. Yun lang naman yung point on both sides lang naman, Attorney Perry, di ba?
Yes po. Actually, lahat po yan na tinatakil na invite po during the congressional hearings tsaka dito sa Senate hearings. Everybody is invited from mga media networks, media organizations to tackle these issues. Ngayon po, nagkakaroon pa rin hanggang ngayon discussion in the Senate regarding that, and all are invited to attend those hearings and to give their comments on each and every provision of the Media Welfare Act. So,
yeah. Thank you, Attorney Perry.
And po, Sir Red po, do you like to add po?
Doon lang sa usapin na ni-raise ni Ariel, especially sa welfare, no. Again, going back to the Philippine Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists. Doon sa flagship area number 2 kasi, doon sa conducive working conditions, one of the actions na nakatutok siya ay to review yung labor laws and their implementation in relation to welfare and protection of media workers and to make recommendations. So mayroong mga concrete actions. Pwede sigurong pagtulong-tulungan ito. Hindi naman natin sinasabi na meron na nakalatag dyan na welfare, na batas or bill for journalist welfare. We're junking it already, but we're trying to look into how to enhance it further, and how does it work. Truly, at saka kasi ang problema diyan pagka tumatakbo na yan, especially sa BICAM, diyan nagkakaroon ng mga pagbabago, so kailangan bantayan yan.
Tsaka yung magiging IRR, implementing rules and regulations.
Yes, that's important, kasi wala namang ngipin yung batas kung wala kang IRR, So what I'm saying is that there are ways of converging all of these actions and all of these plans, paano natin to pagtutulong-tulungan? Journalism cannot exist in a vacuum. Diba? So kailangan natin pag pinag-uusapan natin dito ay strengthening of journalists, and I think Attorney Perry mentioned earlier the whole of nation approach, Parang ganun din 'yon, So I think more stakeholders the better.
Okay. Thank you so much po. Can I add po na question kasi pinag-uusapan po natin on a national view po kasi may nagtanong po na bata, should we require daw yung mga mismong news organizations and media groups to create safety and protection policies to protect their reporters? Sino po?
Dapat meron naman talaga yan sa newsroom policies, di ba? Any newsroom policy, for example, any newsroom for that matter, that take cares of its employees, especially those who are out there in the field. Talagang delikado if they're sent out in a conflicted area. Talagang dapat as simple as, let's say, meron pang load, meron pang meron pang transportation, meron pang kung ano-ano. Kaya nga, di ba, importante yung sinabi ni Jonathan kanina, tsaka ng PT Forms na meron tayong guidelines kasi para sa atin din yon. Pero dapat top to bottom yun. Hindi yung alam lang ng journalists or the people, the reporters covering on the ground. Pero dapat alam yun ng management. Kasi yung management, yung magbibigay ng corresponding resources para sa mga journalists. Dapat meron yan from the very start. But again, hindi natin tinatapos yung discussion or patuloy natin dinidiscuss yung welfare, kahit wala pang Media Welfare Act, ng mga journalists kasi yung iba wala naman talaga or they can barely give their employees those required resources para makabalik sila. No? The important thing kasi pag they're sent out to a conflicted area, syempre sila nang babalik. Paano ba? Makakabalik pa ba sila ng buhay? Importante makabalik sila ng buhay para masabi yung to tell their stories, di ba? Paano hindi na sila makabalik kasi wala namang safety or walang safeguard for them. Parang ganun.
So, dagdag ko lang, Ariel, no, yung sa on the ground, no, kasi yung meron tayong tinatawag na duty of care, no? Meron duty of care, no, media organizations.
Pinag-uusapan dyan yung Ampatuan Massacre.
Ay, Professor Mora, paki-mute po.
Journalist yung patay.
Professor Mora, paki-mute po.
Well, anyway, as I was saying, there's such a thing as duty of care, no? So dapat yung mga media owners, media organizations should be responsible for their people, for their staff, for their editorial staff, reporters, photographers, whoever, yung mga media workers, no? That's their responsibility. It's called duty of care. Kaya lang given some constraints, no, especially at the local level, that's why it's important for media organizations to really come together and address these issues, no? Kasi yung ibang mga media outfits hindi naman nila talaga kaya because of financial constraints.
Okay, Sir Jonathan, may gusto
Siguro dagdag ko lang, no? Yes, tama naman, dapat may policies and pero in the absence of that or in the absence of yung resources nga, no, lalo na dun sa mga smaller newsrooms, a lot of our colleagues rin sila, may initiative sila to help each other. Nag-organize sila, kunyari, kailangan mo ng PPE, bibigyan ka nila ng tip where to get or susubukan ka nilang masupplyan. So that's one way to fill that gap and maganda siyang development. But of course, ang ideal would be, yes, sagot siya ng employer or sagot siya na newsroom. Although yun nga, we do recognize na not all newsrooms have the same resources, no? Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, as with any community naman, it's up to us then na magtulungan para mapunan yung mga pagkukulang na ganito.
Okay, ayan po. Marami pa po tayong question. Sige po, Attorney Perry.
Well, precisely yun ang aim ng media welfare workers na sinusulong ng PT Forms, no? Na lalo nila sa magbigay ng hazard pay at magbigay ng safety equipment, maging obligasyon to ng mga employers ng media workers na sila na mismo magbibigay ng ng hazard pay at ng mga safety equipment if ever they are going to put their journalists in harm's way. So sana nga mapasa natin to, no? Well, of course, yung concerns naman ng mga media owners, of course, are also being taken into consideration by the Senate. Thank you.
Ayan po, related po doon sa nasagot ni Attorney Perry. Meron po kasi nagtatanong, would like to ask how important is the passage of HB 2476? May Senate bill po dati si Senator Jinggoy Estrada. Hindi naman po pumasa or hindi naman na-push. This is the Magna Carta for journalists. Ayan, win-win ba ito for government and the media industry?
Well, personally, we in consultation with Yusek Egko, who is the executive director of PT FOMSA. Actually, medyo hindi hata mas gustong support ng PT FOMS yung economic benefits muna sana. Kasi ang problema kasi pag sa mga Magna Carta may mga baka magkaroon ng mga yung after effect ng batas. Ito maganda yung of course yung ating purposes ng mga batas, pero minsan yung application. So we are actually pushing for yung 8140 and not the Magna Carta for journalists. So as of today, yun muna yung aming pinupush na mapasa. Thank you.
Okay po, and siguro po related din ito, are there more specific and doable operational ways to safeguard the journalists, like reporting whereabouts as SOP, body system, tracking, body cams, dash cams?
Yeah.
Yes, meron naman. In fact, kung gusto nyo, you can go to nujp.org. No? Meron doon yung safety guide for Filipino journalists. Downloadable siya in English, Tagalog, and Bisaya. And yun, malaking tulong siya, lalo na kasi maraming newsrooms din na maaaring hindi sila aware of that need, or marami rin kasi, kunyari ako, nung batang reporter ako, go lang ako basta may storya na hindi man lang ako nagpapaalam sa office. No? So, yun, sinasabi na hindi yun mabuting gawain. So yun, there are ways naman to be prepared for mga coverage na ganyan. So, yep, yun.
Tsaka yung safety protocols talaga kailangan yung sundin, that have to be observed.
Okay, ayan po. Thank you so much po. And question naman po siguro sa academe side naman po ng journalism. Question for Professor Tangi. And kamusta po ang enrollment trend sa journalism courses in the last 10 years? Ayan, may epekto po ba yung mga threats to the journalistic profession?
Hello po, magandang hapon po ulit. Yes po, I was chair of the department from 2012 to 2015. Tapos ito ulit 2019 to 2021. And yung kasi sa UP kasi basta makapasok ka lang sa UP, yun ang target nila regardless kung anong course. But what I noticed is the number of student journalists shifting out of the program. And minsan, pag may opportunity ako makausap sila, tinatanong ko, so why are you shifting out? Ang ganda ng grades mo dito, you write well, ganito, ganyan. Sabi ko, ma'am, ayaw po ng parents ko. Yun po ang sagot nila kasi natatakot po sila. And then, yun nga because of the killing of journalists. Yun palagi yung dinadahilan sa akin. And of course, and aside from the killing of journalists, isa pang concern ng mga students is the low pay of journalists. May mga concerns na gano'n. Kaya after graduation, most of them actually go to non-journalism jobs, no? Call center, PR, gano'n. So, yeah. And meron talagang, I would call it chilling effect din itong killing of journalists, not just the Ampatuan itself, but ito nga, nangyayaring killing of journalists to the students, to the entry of students into the program.
Ayan, thank you very much po.
Pero sorry, quickly.
Sir Ariel?
Yeah, may I add? The good news is that while meron tayong problema dun sa enrollment and all, encouraging probably more graduates, high school graduates to really take a career in journalism, take on a path in journalism by taking a course in college. Meron ng MIL ngayon because of K-12. And that surely helps in making students bata pa lang literate na, and might help really encourage them to be journalists in the future while taking into consideration the hazards of the profession or the job. The MIL exactly benefits a lot of the young generation para ma-appreciate nila yung journalism in the context of, let's say, doing it in dangerous times or during pandemic. So kung ang curriculum natin will probably address yung kakulangan ng mga journalists natin ngayon, it might help. And I think probably in the future we can get more enrollees into journalism. And I think calling out also teachers who are watching us today, educators watching us today, to really be, paano ba yun? Because some are not journalists, in fact, but they're very adept. They're very up to date with what's happening around, much like journalists. Pero kailangan talaga impress dun sa the importance of making sure that all the realities are on the ground are being understood, especially in the forthcoming elections in May. So yun lang naman din. Oo, yung talaga very critical and crucial yung academics talaga in shaping and also appreciating the work of journalists so that local journalism is supported and that excellent journalism is being promoted by all, not just by the media industry.
Ayan, thank you so much, Sir Ariel and Prof. Lou. And meron pong message dito sa chat si Sir Jonathan. Sabi niya, adding lang that the Magna Carta proposed by Estrada included a provision for board exam for journalists. And siguro medyo related dito sa academe, no, which will be a problem for our ideal self-regulation. Sir Jonathan, would you like to expound po about your message po?
Ayun, basically yun na siya, no? But ayun nga, one of the problematic provisions of that proposal, no, yun nga na kailangan mo mag-board exam to be recognized as a journalist, no. So medyo problematic for us dahil ang mangyayari is mapupunta sa isang agency or sa state yung pag-certify sa atin as journalists, no. Actually, dun sa related na Media Workers Welfare Bill, no, isa sa mga provisions yan na pinagdebatehan ng konti kasi there was a provision that said na legitimate journalists uncovered. So given na wala naman tayong actual test for legitimacy of a journalist, nag-move yung NUJP and also National Press Club, no, natanggalin na lang yon. So we're hoping na that provision, yung at least yung phrase na yun, o yung word na yun has been removed from that bill.
Okay. Thank you, Sir Jonathan. Ayan, Ma'am Tangi, balik po ako sa inyo. Bukod daw po dun sa threat, isa din po ba dahilan kaya bumababa yung mga students na nag-enroll sa journalism dahil marami daw nagsasabi kahit sino pwede naman daw maging journalist?
Ayun, isa pang kwan yun, ano nga lang nito, yes, isa pang factor, no, na anybody can be a journalist, you don't actually need a degree. Pwede ka maging vlogger na ngayon, yung gano'n, meron pa rin, pero I think tayo naman sa academe, tinuturo natin na iiba kasi yung training sa journalism school. Okay, we always emphasize that. And sa mga nakikinig ngayon mga estudyante, I think we have some students here na sa high school, tsaka mga teachers din. Sana i-remind natin yung ganito na ito, vlogger, iba yan sa journalist, na trained journalist who follows yung ethics, the proper ways of reporting, yung mga gano'n.
Tama naman din, di ba, Prof. Lou? Marami talaga journalists that did not take a career in journalism pero ang gagaling. That's why it's important to impress the importance of discipline ng journalism more than the theoretical framework. Kasi yung discipline, unlike other disciplines kasi, talagang inherent yan sa journalism, So dapat talaga yung matutunan talaga. Kahit anong kurso ka, meron mga political science, pero journalism, mathematics, pero journalism, pero yung discipline talaga, importante yun.
Yun, I'd like to add lang din, no, na it's true na hindi kailangan yung course ng college na to become a journalist, but sobrang laki ng tulong niya. Like for example, hindi ako journal grad, so it took me siguro at least 5 years bago makuha yung inaral nyo na bago pa kayo pumasok sa profession. So definitely advantage pa rin siya. And yun.
Ayan, okay. Moving forward naman sa iba pang question kasi marami po tayong mga students dito na kasama sa ating forum. Kasama daw po ba dun sa bill ang protection for campus journalists? Kasi we also experience threats, harassments, and censorship. Yan. What are your reaction to this po? A question for Prof. Lou and Attorney Perry. Prof. Lou?
Sorry. Pasensya na, Paki-ulit lang yung question, medyo hindi ko
Opo,
na-read.
kasama daw po ba sa bill ang protection for campus journalists kasi they also experience threats, harassments, and censorship. So ano daw po yung reaction nyo dito?
Siguro mas maganda, we ask someone from the campus journalists to answer that.
Bukod po siguro dun sa Campus Journalism Act of 1991, makakasama daw po ba yung mga young journals doon sa media welfare law, attorney?
Yes, yung media welfare actually is more on economic benefits ng mga those who are employed as media workers, no? One of the debates actually is that is being tackled by the Senate hearing, by the Senate committee under Senator Joel Villanueva is whether to include public, those who employed with the government, to be included with the benefits that will be supposedly to be given to the journalists under the Welfare Act. So medyo employment kasi siya ang issue dito halos ang issue ng employment. So I'm not sure kung may bayad ba dyan kayo. Most probably, those are voluntary basis ang mga campus journalists. And being that you are students of the colleges that are working and hopefully maging journalists kayo, eventually after you magkaroon kayo ng dyan profession, no? And ma-hire kayo ng mga media workers, then on that time, baka sana ma-benefitan kayo ng nitong Media Welfare Act. Hopefully sana nga ma-approve to ng Senate at ng Congress. Thank you.
Okay po.
Idagdag ko lang kasi by definition yung mga campus journalists, they cannot be classified as professional journalists. So hindi sila kasama. They are not employed. Kaya hindi sila by nature kasama na sa welfare law. Yun lang po.
Okay. Can I still accommodate more questions, Ma'am Tangi, or are we running out of time dito po sa ating forum? Or continue lang po? Meron pa po kasi mga questions eh.
Pwede mga 2 questions siguro? Last 2? Okay.
Okay po. I'm not a journalist daw po. A question from Ma'am Tracy. Ayun. Is there an umbrella organization that journalists can join so that they can safeguard each other? I am more from the film and broadcast industry, and we have Actors Guild, Producers Guild, Screenwriters Guild. There's also an OPM for musicians. Do journalists have this?
NUJP.
Yeah, NUJP po.
Kaya marami po yung mga media organization. Sir Jonathan, pwede niyo po bang i-mention yung mga media organizations na pwedeng tumulong or pwedeng salihan ng mga media professionals?
Well, syempre may bias ako sa NUJP. No? We have more than 30 chapters across the country. So kung yun lang po, message na lang po kayo sa amin or mag-iwa kayo ng comment sa website and we will get in touch with you. Pero kung gusto niyo rin po, maganda rin naman na mag-organize in your area. The idea naman po talaga is for the community to support each other. No? So it doesn't matter so much kung anong group siya. Basta nagtutulungan tayo. Pero syempre, again, bias ko ay NUJP.
Ayan. Okay, meron po pala tayong question sa ating Facebook live stream from ayan. Are there areas in the Philippines na daw po that could be potentially be an area where violence on media could happen? Lalo na po ngayon papalapit ang election. Say, on the Ampatuan Massacre, there was an area where much power is held by 1 or 2 rival families which could potentially affect press freedom. So, as early as now, meron na po ba tayong mga na-identify na parang mga places na parang dapat mag-ingat na yung mga journalist? Anyone po? Sir Jonathan, meron na po ba as early as now? Parang yung mga hotspot areas natin, para doon sa mga journalist natin?
I think that's more for the PNP, no? Sila nag-identify ng hotspots. So baka PT forms. Pero in general, we really do need to take care. No? We expect na yung incidents or yung likelihood of election-related violence or attacks ay tataas dahil nga mag-election. And yun nga, statistically naman ay nakikita na dumadami na yung attacks against journalists during the election season. No? So ingat lang po tayong lahat. Parang it doesn't matter. Parang siguro yung nature of the attack or yung nature of the threat lang magbabago. Like, kunyari nasa NCR ka, it would most likely be online, versus kunyari sa probinsya, and there's a risk na it's physical. So, yun po, ingat na lang po tayo lagi. And let's always assume na, let's always assume na there might be a threat against us, and take precautions against them.
Okay. Ayan. And yes
Well,
po, Attorney Mary.
of course, the one of the primary functions of the task force is to collect data regarding media violence and such no. So as per the data of the presidential task force, actually, of course, one of the most vulnerable regions to, of course, walang tatalo dun sa BARM, no, dahil nga nangyaring Ampatuan Massacre doon, and sobrang daming na kaso doon. After that, our number 2 regions actually that has the highest number of major killings is region 11 and 12. So region 11 and 12, it's yun yung mataas din sa amin, and then after that is region 3, and then region 9 and 5. Ang XCR actually is number 6 on our statistics. So yun yung mga regions na medyo mataas yung mga occurrence ng mga major killings. With relate to major killings, of course. Thank you.
Okay po. Ayan, no, sana dito sa chat box natin meron, wala na kaming hindi nasagutan sa inyong mga questions, and to end po siguro our open forum, kasi marami po tayo estudyante nga na medyo bata po, or hindi po nila nadatnan yung mismong November 23, 2009 na news reports on the Ampatuan Massacre. May nagtatanong po kasi dito, or ayan, nagpapatulong, or sabi niya po, pakisalaysay nga po ulit kung ano ang motivation ng pagpaslang sa mga magundadato at bakit nadawit ang mga journalist. Ito po ba ay pinlano mula sa umpisa o nagkataon lang na maraming journalist ang kasama ng mga magundadato? Ayan, to end our discussion, umpisahan po natin ulit bakit daw po nagkaroon or nadawit yung mga media sa Ampatuan Massacre. Anyone po?
Sige po,
Sige po,
mag-start
attorney.
ako, no? Saglit lang,
Sige,
no?
si Perry.
Actually, I read the decision. It's very long, no? Yung decision. And actually, I regret reading it because parang masasamahan loob mo kung paano nangyari ang Ampatuan Massacre, no? From the way na plinano yon until dung nangyari yun mismo. Hindi lang naman murder nangyari. Before the murder, maraming pang ibang mga nangyari to the victims. Kaya nakakaawa talaga sila. At maiiyak ka kung paano nagawa to ng mga tao. Parang nasa parang once you read it, parang hindi ka makapaniwala sa mga nababasa mo dun sa nangyari. So of course, this is an election-related violence. Plano ni, as far as I understand it, plano ni mga dadato is to file an election, the certificate, the COC. Yung parang nakita na natin ngayon sa TV, di ba? Yung paano sila mag-file ng COC sa COMELEC, yun yung plano, and supposedly para maging safer daw, yung asawa niya and mga kapatid nung asawa niya ang sumama, and para mas marami na maging safer is for the journalists na sumama rin to file it. But because, of course, as yung sa narration sa kaso, no, prior to that, may plano na talagang iinto para ma-prevent yung filing na yun. At in order to prevent yan na nangyari. Yan ang nagawa na. So if you have, kung may guts kayo na basahin yung decision, well, medyo mahirap basahin siya dahil talagang ako mismo as a lawyer, actually my profession originally, I'm a journalist. I'm a graduate of UST journalism before ako maging lawyer. Nag-practice ako saglit ng journalism bago ako maging abogado. Medyo mahirap talaga sikmuraan yung nangyari dun sa ngayon. Kaya please for those students who are wishing to become journalists, okay, that's a very good profession. No? That's a very good profession. I don't want to dissuade that because I also a journalist. But of course, let us always put in mind that safety is always number one concern din sa atin. Thank you, thank you.
Sorry, naka-mute pala ako. Ayan, Sir Ariel or Sir Jonathan, may gusto po ba kayong i-add about doon sa bakit daw nakasama yung media sa Ampatuan Massacre?
Yan si Jonathan.
No, hindi, tama naman sinabi ni Attorney Perry, no? And well, according to witness testimony, ano daw yun, diba? Dahil parang nag-request yung mga Ampatuan na wag munang tumakbo si Mang Udadatu, pero hindi siya pumayag sa request. And right after that request was turned down, yun na daw, pinlano na raw yung massacre, no? And yun nga, tama naman, kasama nga yung media supposedly, so para safer, no? Kasi who would attack a caravan na may kasamang journalists? But yun, as we saw, hindi siya naging parang, so siguro yun din, one more point to consider is ingat din tayo na baka isasama tayo sa mga coverage na delikado naman. So, yun, something to keep in mind when planning our coverage in future.
Also, if you come to think of it kasi, it's newsworthy. It's legitimate that they covered the event because the Mungunda Datus were running against a political stalwart. So it's something that they had to cover, and that it's really very important to get the context yung konteksto ng bakit tumakbo yung Mungunda Datus, and they're up against a giant so newsworthy talaga. So but unfortunately, yun ang kinahinatnan nung pagpunta nila, pag-cover nila. So it's really very horrible.
Pero siguro, Ariel, kailangan din natin tingnan yung ugat nung sa Ampatuan Massacre, no? Ito yung warlordism, no? Being used for political expediency by those in the national government, yung mga national politicians. Actually, paano gamitin yung mga political clans, no? To negate rivals or to balance off against other rivals for political gains in a particular area. So yun din dapat so it's also a cautionary tale for journalists to be somewhat circumspect when it comes to covering similar situations. Huwag tayong laging sugod na sugod. Nakita din natin doon na nakulang din yung communications protocol, for instance. Hindi alam ng newsroom kung saan nandun yung mga journalists na tumatakbo na pala until such time na nangyari na yon. So even those in the convoy, they weren't really in touch. So they didn't know what's happening 5 minutes ahead of time. So yung mga ganun. But again, the larger picture of warlordism in the Philippines, hindi pa rin yan na-erase. Tumatakbo pa rin yan at ginagamit pa rin yan. And so we should be really looking at that in terms of context when it comes to reporting.
So no story's worth your life. If you think you're gonna die, then do not cover, diba? Or say no to the newsroom kasi alam mong hindi ka makakabalik ng buhay. More importantly.
Okay, ayan po para dun sa mga students natin na kasama natin sa ating Zoom meeting, pwede po kayo mag-search ng mga related na documentary about Ampatuan Massacre, and nag-send din po kami ng link about dun sa full decision sa Ampatuan Massacre case, and pwede niyo pong basahin yan para ma-enlighten pa kayo para sa mga tatanong bakit daw nasama yung media dyan sa Ampatuan Massacre. Ayan, would you like to end po our forum, Professor Lou? Ayan, since si Sir Ariel po ay or may gusto po kayong i-add, Prof. Lou?
Ay, okay na po.
Okay na.
Yeah.
Okay po, before we proceed po sa next part ng ating program, balikan po natin yung message or yung mensahe po ng Chair of Justice Now, si Ma'am Emily Lopez. Ma'am Emily?
Magandang hapon sa lahat, and thank you for inviting us sa webinar. So this is an opportunity na as part of the 12 years commemoration of the incident, may mga tao pa rin na siyang pwedeng makakatulong sa amin sa paghanap ng hustisya. So, una sa lahat siguro, no, pasensya na po kasi parang hindi ako sanay mag-Tagalog. I hope na maintindihan ng lahat na nasa Mindanao po kami at saka nasa Cebuano area. So, yung in behalf po sa Justice Now, yung families at saka sa relatives ng mga biktima ng massacre, bali, meron kaming 4 na point na pwedeng ipaabot, no, sa mga lahat na na-join sa webinar ngayong hapon. Una-una, yung patuloy na paghanap ng hustisya sa kaso. Kalawa po, yung panawagan namin na Fight for 58 kasi meron kaming isang kasamahan, yung si Rinaldo Mumay, na sad to say na hindi nakasama doon sa desisyon ng court na pinalabas noong December 2019. Katatlo po, yung panawagan namin na sana po ihinto na po may mga media group kasi na gumagamit sa kaso para mapagpirahan kami. Tsaka ika-4 po, yung panawagan na end the impunity, tsaka yung possible na activity this coming 12-year commemoration November 23, 2021. So, yun po yung 4 na yun na points po. Yung una-una, patuloy na paghahanap ng hustisya. Alam po natin na nung 2019, pinalabas na po kumbaga yung verdict. So, yung panindigan na po ng family talaga, una-una, nakita namin na talagang partial justice, no? Yung nangyari doon. Yung para ba nasayang yung 10 taon naming pakikibaka na kasama yung mga journalist na hindi kami iniwan. At masakit para sa amin yung may mga grupo o yung mga sangkop doon, no, yung mga kumbaga ang mga akusado na may mga na-absuelto, may mga punishment na 10 years. Yung iba po na sali sa principal suspect po, yung sa mga life sentence nila, parang hindi po katanggap-tanggap ang desisyon ng korte. Kasi yung the day na pinalabas yung desisyon, yung mga anak po ng mga biktima, talaga po nagpalabas na kanilang sentimento na may mga pangamba, may mga takot ang pamilya, kasi kung mayroong may pinalaya, may posibilidad na malalagay sa alanganin at saka sa yung security po ng pamilya ay talagang hindi po siya secured, no? So, kumbaga sana kung sangkot ang mga taong ito sa kaso, sana naman binigyan din po ng korte ng konsiderasyon na ipataw po yung karampatang punishment para sa kanila. Siyempre, yung sabi natin na sa criminal aspect po, yung binigay po na punishment, no? Kasali doon na sana naman yung part of the justice, no? Yung compensation para sa nangyari, no? Sa pamilya. Kasi po alam niyo, yung pagkawala po ng mahal sa buhay ng mga victims, no? Hindi po kasing sabi natin na madali. Sa ngayon po, may namamatay na sa mga asawa, sa ina ng mga nabiktima. Tsaka yung may mga bata po, may mga anak po na may mga sakit. So kailangan pong sana tulong ng kanilang mga ama o ina na kung buhay pa sana, no? May mga bata kasi na, may mga anak kasi na yung may mga problema sa cardio diseases, no? Yung may mga maintenance ng 21 days, kailangan silang i-inject. So talagang mahirap kung i-compare mo o kumbaga ititingnan mo doon sa pinalabas na desisyon ng korte. So partial justice po para sa amin yun. Ang ikalawang punto siguro yung panawagan namin na fight for 58. Kasi alam namin from the start, si Rinaldo Mumay, talagang kasama yun sa panawagan namin. Maliwanag po ang aming panindigan na sana naman kumbaga na let Rinaldo Mumay be the 58 victims ng massacre. Kasi po yung sabihin mo na yung pamilya na malaki expectation na at the end of the case talagang sana nandun yung ama niya na kasali dun sa recognize ng korte na biktima din, hindi po nakasali. So, yung sabi namin na hindi po buo yung pagkikibaka namin kasi 57 lang ang na-include dun sa desisyon na mabigyan ng partial justice. So, ang panawagan po ng pamilya sa korte na kilalanin at isama si Momay sa bilang ng mga dapat mabigyan ng hustisya. Po sa Justice Now, kasama po yung mga media, yung Inyo JP at iba pang mga organization na patuloy na titindig po upang ipaglaban ang kasong to. Yung katatlo po, kasi recently may nabasa kami sa social media na isang solicitation letter na group of media from Mindanao. Gumawa po sila ng solicitation. Sabi namin kawawa naman yung mga patay, binipirahan pa. Yung sa solicitation po, included doon ng quotation. Sabi nila pupunta ng massacre site for the commemoration, Tapos nakalagay doon may 10,000, may 15,000 na quotation na kung sino yung mga politician na bibigay, i-recognize nila. So sabi namin, patay na nga, pinipirahan pa. So stop using the incident kasi kami nga mismo, yung pamilya, ayaw naming humingi ng tulong. Kasi mas marami, ngayon, amid sa pandemic, maraming dapat tulungan. So dapat naman yung mga media na gumawa nun, kumbaga, sana naman stop na. Yung sa ika-apat, kasi sabi natin na yung media kasi wala naman silang ibang layunin, kundi iparating yung katotohanan, kung ano yung pong dapat nga i-report. Kasi yun naman talaga ang dapat, di ba? So sa amin lang na kami mismo na families ng Ampatuan Massacre. Part kami ng kumbaga biktima kasi 10 years yung matagal man tayo yung hustisya tapos partial lang pala. Tsaka mabagal yung usad ng hustisya. Kaya sabi namin, sana naman sa iba kasing country, yung ganong kaklaseng matinding kaso, mataas po yung buwan tsaka 2 taon na magkakaroon na ng resulta. Sa Pilipinas po, matagal. At habang pong marami po ang kaso na nakabinbin sa korte, patuloy pa rin po ang atake sa ating mga kasamahang journalist. Tsaka wala naman ibang kasalan kundi hatid lang ng katotohanan. So, sabi namin, ang Justice Now, hindi lang kami nakatutok dun sa kaso ng Ampatuan Massacre. Kasi habang patuloy pa rin inaatake ang media, patuloy pa rin may pinapatay, masakit sa sa part namin na, kumbaga ba, na sabi namin, sana as a whole, kung ma-stop na yung killings ng media at saka ng ibang mga institution, siguro package na yon na narating na namin yung talagang full justice. Kasi habang may pinapatay, habang may inaatake, sabi namin, masakit pa rin. Kasi yung mga namatay na mahal namin sa buhay is part ng media institution. So we are calling no, na sana tama na yun. Tama na yung dahas. Tsaka sabi namin, ang family kasi no, na yung mga anak, may mga nag-a-aspire naman mag journalist din, no? Sabi namin, yung nangyari sa inyong mga ama, sa inyong mga ina, wag sana yung, kumbaga, hindi natin yung iti-take na negative. Kasi kung namatay yung ama at ina ninyo, be proud. Kasi they are part of the media na talagang lehitimo, na talagang isusulong yung katotohanan sa komunidad. So, yun na no. Tapos, sabi namin, yung kung halimbawa, as part ng justice talaga, mayroon tayong 3 component, no? Yung una-una, yung mabigyan po ng karampatang parusa ang mga akusado. Saka ikalawa, sana naman magkaroon ng public apology ang mga akusado. Despite na nabigyan sila ng ganong verdict, no? Sana naman magkaroon ng public apology. And then third, yung talagang dapat may kompensasyon sa ginawa nila sa mga biktima. So, kung may mga katanungan po tayo, no? Sige, open po tayo.
That was Ma'am Emily Lopez of Justice Now. Ayan, meron po ba tayong gustong itanong or i-add doon po sa message ni Ma'am Emily? From our participants po, meron po ba? Siguro po yung mga concerns po ni Ma'am Emily na nabanggit, siguro po yung NUJP ay makakatulong din po doon sa part na parang ginagamit yung Ampatuan Massacre para pagkakitaan or mag-gain ng support from other people pero hindi naman po talaga nabibigay doon sa mga victims. I know yung NUJP po at saka yung even mga media organization ay nakatutok din po dito. Meron pa po bang questions or ano? Sir Jonathan, may gusto po ba kayong i-mensahe? Okay na po. Okay, thank you so much po, Ma'am Emily, sa pagsama po sa amin ngayong hapon dito po sa ating forum.
Salamat po. Magandang hapon.
Magandang hapon po. Now po, let us have a moment of silence po for all the people who died in the Ampatuan Massacre. Ito pong moment of silence ay para alalahanin yung mga naging contribution po ng mga media practitioners na nakasama sa Ampatuan Massacre. Kasabay din po nito ay pagdarasal para po sa kanilang kaluluwa. Now, their names will be read by Ma'am Cherry Pebre, the Secretary of Journalism Association of the Philippines.
Thank you so much, Ms. Angelica. Benji Adolfo. Henry Araneta. Macdelbert Ariola. Rubelio Bataluna. Arturo Betia. Romeo Jimmy Caballo. Marites Cablitas. Hannibal Cachuela. Hepon Kadagdagon. John Caniban. Leia Dalmasio. Noel Decina, Gina de la Cruz, Joy Duhay, Polito Ivardo, Santos Gatchalian, Benvenido Legarte Jr., Lindo Lupugan, Ernesto Maravilla, Ray Meresco, Marife Montano, Rosel Morales, Victor Nunez, Ronnie Perante, Joel Parcon, Fernando Razon, Alejandro Reblando, Napoleon Salaysay, Francisco Subang, Andres Teodoro, Daniel Tiamson, Reynaldo Mumay, Eden Magudadatu, Jenaline Mangudadatu, Matabay Mangudadatu, Rowena Mangudadatu, Manguba Mangudadatu, Farina Mangudadatu, Pareda Mangudadatu, Farida Kagil, Suraida Deman, Raida Sapalon Abdul, Wahida Ali, Pinky Balayman, Ella Balayman, Rahima Pueto Palawan, Ella Balayman, Miriam Kalimbol, Patricia Palapay, Concepcion Brizuela, Cynthia Onkindo Ogari, Catalino Onkindo, Art Mascardo, Razul Daoud, Eugene Depeliano, Tidik Edsa, Patrick Pamansang, Wilhelm Malabrica, Abdullah Haji Dodong.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Cherry Pebres, the Secretary of JSAP. The 12th anniversary of Ampatuan Massacre is a reminder for all of us to continue to fight for justice and freedom of the press. We would like to thank you for joining us in this forum. Our dear participants, our dear guests, Attorney Perry Solis, Sir Jonathan De Santos, Sir Red Batario, Professor Lucia Tangi, Sir Ariel Sebelino, and Attorney Gets Heineke. Isang mapagpalayang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Thank you for attending the forum Walang Forgive and Forget, Ampatuan Massacre and the May 2022 Elections. This is a forum hosted by Journalism Studies Association of the Philippines and Philippine Press Institute, supported by Seidel Foundation in cooperation with Internews and Radyo Libertas of Holy Cross College. This has been Angelica Marie Simpao. Maraming salamat po at ingat po kayong lahat.
Thank you. Please do not forget to respond to the questionnaire or evaluation so that you also get your certificates. It is going to be posted on the chat room, Care. Thanks, Angelica.
Thank you so much po.
Maraming salamat po.
Salamat, JSAP. Salamat, Seidel Foundation. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. Magpo-promote lang po ako bukas at 1 p.m. It's going to be the Media Information Literacy on Voter Education organized by the Philippine Press Institute. I posted the link, the Zoom link. Okay na, diretso na po kayo. Kahit hindi na mag-register in the PPI FB page. Maraming salamat po for being with us.
Yeah,
Ayan, yung link na lang, wala pa yata.
Ayun na po, na-send na po.
Okay na pala. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Salamat, Angelica. Salamat, Ariel.
Salamat.
Salamat sa lahat. Red, Jonathan, and Attorney Kerry.
Maraming
At
salamat.
kay Ma'am
Thank you.
Emily,
Bye-bye.
salamat din.
Salamat.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Ariel.
Carol,
Thank you,
thank
Caro,
you.
salamat.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, salamat.
Salamat.